Hi, everybody. Welcome to Morning Java at DKPittsburghSports.com. I'm Chris Bradford, joined by Matt Grubba. And Matt, it looks like our long national nightmare is over. Pitt has finally hired a basketball coach, Jeff Capel. What can you tell us about Mr. Capel?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, for a beat writer, the coaching search ending is the end of a little bit of a nightmare. And you know what? It turns out to be a hire with some name recognition for Pitt after there were worries when Dan Hurley took the UConn job instead of Pitt that who would Pitt find? Would it be anyone, with the pedigree to handle the ACC? Well, they get a guy off of the staff of another ACC team. Jeff Capel, of course, was a four-year starter for Mike Krzyzewski at Duke back in the 90s. At one point, he was the youngest Division I coach when he got the head coaching job at VCU at just 27. Had a stint at Oklahoma with Blake, where he was able to recruit Blake Griffin, had a run to the Elite Eight there. And since his time at Oklahoma, he's been back on staff as the number 2 guy for Mike Krzyzewski the last 7 years. So, I mean, he's been at big programs. He's been in the ACC. That's probably the best thing you can say about him.
I was going to say, he's only 43 years old. How important was that for Pitt to get, as a 44-year-old, I'm glad that that's considered a young guy, but to get a younger guy into the program, to get some new blood in there.
Yeah, well, he checks both boxes that, you really had. You could tell from Pitt fan reactions, sort of two warring factions. Some people said they wanted a name coach, like a Tom Crean who ended up going to Georgia. Thad Matta's name popped up. You had that set of people that wanted a veteran, and then you also had the people who wanted a young, up-and-coming guy like Hurley, like for a long time Buffalo's Nate Oates. After their upset win over Arizona, his name really got hot. So you had those two things. Capel checks both boxes. Like you said, 43 years old, so if he decides, this is a place he can build long-term success, he will be here as long as the wins come.
Now, you mentioned his pedigree, and not just any kind of pedigree in an ACC program. We're talking about Duke, one of the blue bloods in college basketball. How important was it to get, a guy from that kind of program and from the ACC?
I mean, with Duke, you see the history of Mike Krzyzewski coaches or assistants going on to coach elsewhere. You have Mike Bray at Notre Dame. You've had Tommy Amaker is at Harvard currently. He's bounced around some. Steve Wojciechowski is now the Marquette head coach. So there's a pipeline there, and I think that just that experience being around success, being around winning, and again, being in the ACC doing it, is all going to work out in Capel's advantage.
Now, Matt, I got to ask you, there was 8 players, I believe, that were asking for the transfer after Kevin Stallings was let go. What's kind of the future of those guys? Are they going to come back with Capel coming in?
Well, that's going to be an ever-evolving story, and as we tape right now, there have already been a couple of guys, Shamil Stevenson and leading scorer Jared Wilson-Frame, have already indicated that they like the hire and they're coming back, is what they've said on social media. Definitive answers from each individual guy. I mean, that's going to be a case-by-case basis. There might be some guys that want to go, but largely it seems like it's a well-received hire by both the current players and former players on social media. A lot of guys from Pitt's recent teams. I noticed Brad Wanamaker, Gilbert Brown, guys off Pitt's heyday years that weren't that long ago. They've all been very positive on Twitter about the hire.
Now, what's your inclination towards this? I mean, this is a hire that a lot of people have been talking about here for the last few weeks. How do you feel that Pitt did here?
I think Pitt did as well as could be expected given the circumstances of having to fire Kevin Stallings after just 2 years. That would probably give some coaches pause. It's like, am I only going to get 2 years coming to a place like this? But Capel, is a guy who has a track record at Division I schools. He's been around. I think that you really couldn't have hoped for much better given the circumstances at Pitt.
Now, reportedly, this is a 7-year deal, so it looks like he's in here for the long run. How long do you think it takes for him to turn this program around? It looks like, hey, one win, you're better than you did last year in the ACC.
Exactly. And, it's hard to tell how quick of a turnaround it will be because it's a twofold problem. One, how much do the players who do return, how much do they develop? Because, I mean, remember at one point, Pitt was putting 5 freshmen on the court last year. So you have the combination of that to go with how well is Capel going to be able to recruit? And you've got, here's a guy, he recruited Blake Griffin to Oklahoma, and he's been one of the lead recruiter on some of the top Duke players, Jabari Parker, Harry Giles, some of the big names that they've brought in to their program since he returned. So the recruiting track record is there. How long is it going to take him to bring in that sort of a name to Pitt? Is he going to be able to? that's going to affect the time frame. So if he can land a big name like that, maybe we're talking 1 or 2 years. Otherwise, it might take 3 or 4 just to really get the consistent winning going again.
Now, Matt, we were talking a little bit earlier about Jeff Capel and his time at Duke. Of course, that wasn't his first stop. We mentioned VCU, but also Oklahoma, where it did not end well for him.
Right, and Oklahoma, he was fired in 2011 after, if memory serves, a 5 or 6 year run there. Of course, the early years of his time there, he had replaced Kelvin Sampson and was able to recruit, a #1 NBA draft pick in Blake Griffin. That team went to the Elite Eight, lost to North Carolina in that Elite Eight. Happened to be the same weekend, and Pitt fans will cringe at this, that very same weekend in 2009 when Scotty Reynolds hit the shot that knocked them out of the Elite Eight. So, that happened to be the farthest both Capel's teams and a Pitt team have gone in any recent memory. So the years after Griffin left, things went a little backwards for him. And then there was some trouble with the former assistant of Capel's with the recruitment of Tiny Gallon, which was always a fun name to listen to on the basketball games. But they had to vacate all of their wins in 2010 as a result of impermissible benefits and the fact that Oklahoma was already on probation. It was not a first-time offense from dating to the Kelvin Sampson years, not related to Capel. Capel was not implicated in any of the violations, however. There were no penalties against him, and that's why when he was fired, which was basically a performance-based firing because the Sooners had back-to-back losing seasons, he landed back at Duke, and there have been no whispers or murmurs of trouble, thankfully. So it looks like in that sense, Pitt got a clean hire, which I know was big on Heather Lyke's priority list, being someone who has a background in compliance at Ohio State before she got her own AD job.
Well, I think if there's one thing that Pittsburghers can relate to, and certainly Mike Sullivan is a case, guy gets a coaching job earlier in his career, gets fired, had a good run, but ends up getting fired, and he's able to, grow from that experience. And you saw what Mike Sullivan's been able to do here with the Penguins the last 2 years.
Yeah, and that's true. And you see examples of that all around. I mean, I think in football, Tom Coughlin comes to mind. Had a good run as a head coach with the Jaguars, got them close, but not quite there. And then, with the Giants, that second job was where he was able to really, make his way, win 2 Super Bowls. So, with Capel, especially being as young as he is, that could be a possibility too. That, that time away, now that he's had a head coaching job, then he's had a chance to go sit back and, observe as the #2 guy under Mike Krzyzewski, who's the all-time wins leader. He's had every opportunity to really learn, and this is a guy with coaching in his blood too. His father was a head coach at the Division I level and a 10-year NBA assistant before he passed away last year. So, I mean, this is a guy that knows what he's doing, and as we said in one of the earlier in the show, I think all things considered, this was about as good as Pitt could have done for a hire.
All right, now it's time for my favorite segment. It's What's in Your Cup, and Matt, what's in Matt's cup? We have a question here today from Rusty58, who has just one question. Why the public mess of offering and being snubbed by 3 or 4 coaches before they made an offer to Jeff Capel?
Well, you know what? There's a few different angles to that, and I can't give what the exact reason was. I mean, first of all, you can't talk to most of these coaches until their teams are out of the tournament. Duke only got eliminated this past Sunday by Kansas, so the chance to even talk to Capel hadn't come around. And I think it was pretty clear Hurley was actually their first choice. They went after him, and didn't go the way they wanted. He chose the UConn job instead. As far as a second choice, there were a lot of names being thrown out there.
Oh yes,
but
was Sean Miller one of those names?
Yeah, of course. But I see Heather Lyke was taking her time, doing her due diligence, and after being rejected by their first choice, which was Hurley, even though these names were being thrown out, there was never any, authoritative reporting that another person had been offered, another thing. And we're talking about this like Pitt took so long to do this. We're talking about a window of 5 days from, I think it was 5 days from Hurley taking it to when the offer to Capel first got reported. So, I mean, we're talking a pretty short window of time, and I think they just, before they made a second offer, wanted to make sure it was the right guy.
All right, well, that'll do it for today. For Matt Grubba, I'm Chris Bradford. You can leave your comments right here below in the link that you can't see right now, but I can't see. But we'll see you next time.